I don't remember how long ago it was, but at some point in the last month or two, you talked about, I don't remember at what point it is really that he goes through this, but Mohammad kind of thinking that he's going crazy, and I guess how does he know, or how might anyone know that there's something that's protecting them versus someone who really is just
Crazy?
going to completely lose their mind in a way that they can never come back.
Can you ask your question again?
In a different way. I guess maybe especially, if someone is going through some version of this process with these kinds of ideas and has become very intense with them, and maybe it becomes a lot. How can they know or trust, or is it just not possible? They're okay.
There are when the three of us were going to Hussein, all three of us individually were going through our own unique episodes. But we would always go back to being a community. You want to stay up and you want to cry and you want to scream. And your lamenting could result in an experience of sorts, maybe a dream, uh, maybe some kind of experience. But because we had created this kind of friendship, whenever any of us were having an episode, we would immediately call Hussein. We could go, I would go to Mehrdad sometimes. Sometimes I would go to Hussein, who was a few years older than I was. Even when Mohammed was going through his episodes, he had a wife to go to. And they spoke similar language, the same language. And then she took him to a Christian monk. If you have a community, if you have friendships, and by friendships again, I mean that there's 4 or 5 of you, and you have been kind of going through these stages and steps, all of you at the same time together. The way you think about the stuff kind of is the same. Your language is the same. There is hardly any envy or resentment or jealousy or anger that lives inside this community. Okay? There is going to be jealousy and envy. But they're not going to destroy the relation. They can't, because your relationship, they're all being grounded by a center, and that was Hussein for us, you know. So remember, you can be lonely in a community, you know, and it's important. You need that. If, on the other hand, you know, you're going through all these ideas and you have all these intense feelings inside you, and you happen to have a life that involves, say, a family life, and you also have a job, and you also have this kind of private life. This private life has emotions and a language related to these emotions that your family life will never understand, okay? There's a good chance you can't really talk about that stuff in the classroom, especially if that's not your nature, if you're not kind of seasoned or trained to kind of bring these lofty ideas down to earth and express them in a way that, kind of like the movie The Philadelphia, that even a 2-year-old can understand. Okay, it even makes you more alone, more miserable, and it puts a lot of pressure on you, you know. So your question, in many ways, really has to do with, here is an individual going through all these different things. It's not that you don't have people around you. It's just that there are no real friendships in this world. So you think that you're going crazy, you know. You know, I don't know how the Desert Fathers used to do it, some of them, where they live in a cave for like 30, 40 years. They don't eat much. They fast, you know, most of the times. They have all these dreams and all these experiences, and yet they can survive. I mean, that's a sort of faith and love and devotion that I don't think exists in modernity. You know, we can read about them, listen to them, enjoy, you know, the narratives, but that's, I think, as far as we can go, you know. I think it's a different context, leap of faith. You know, there is a story about Muhammad's cousin, Ali, that sometimes the pressure on the inside was just a bit too much. And he didn't want to burden his wife, and he didn't want to burden his children, and he didn't want to burden his friends. And the truth is, he didn't really know who to talk to. No one could understand all the pain that lived inside him. So he would walk about an hour or so to a place where there was a well, and there was some depth. It was deep. And so he would put his head inside this well and scream. And then the echo, you know, I hate my life. And other well would say, I hate my life. And there he could find friendship, you know. I think the best that any one of us can do at certain moments is that they just pick up a phone, and it may be that Alison is not equipped to kind of process or digest that particular experience, but you have taken a leap of faith. You're just going to assume that she gets it. That even if she doesn't get it, she has enough self-respect and also respect for you, knowing full well that you enjoy these ideas, that she just says, okay, go ahead, say more. I have nothing to do for the next 3 hours. You want to scream? Go ahead, scream. You know? Because the thing is, whatever it is that you experience in life, it doesn't matter what it is. Whatever you experience creates pressure inside you. Okay? Now, the way you release pressure is by feeling it, by thinking it, by talking about it. Okay? Sometimes the pressure is so much that you can't think it, you can't talk it, okay? Maybe you can write it, maybe not, but perhaps it's only tears, maybe screaming, maybe just picking up the phone, calling in and just start talking rubbish. The pressure needs to be released somehow, okay? And that's what experiences do. It doesn't matter what it is, okay? Even if you go home tonight and you have this dream that God has paid you a visit. Let me give you an example, and it goes back to Jordan Peterson. When he was hired at the university, there was this colleague of his, I forget his name, but he was one of the members who pushed to get this man hired at the University of Toronto, I think. Was it Toronto, Ottawa, or something? Anyways, so the guy retired, his old colleague. Jordan has a dream. I don't remember exactly the content of the dream, but and this is that this old colleague of his was saying in this interview. That he calls me at 2 a.m. and says, "I've had this dream. I am the new Messiah."
Huh?
Okay. Now, this is not a bad thing to say because, it's kind of like the I am gospel, the gospel of John, where you go to the crowd and say, "I am God. I am bread. I am light. Before Abraham, I was." It's a great place to be if you're not, deluded, if you're not nuts, if you're not crazy. And I don't think Jordan is crazy. This is a man who has a lot of experience, with drugs, with alcohol, with depression. He's also a man versed. He knows what he's talking about, And the way he speaks, it's quite inspirational. It really, really is. Now, imagine if Jordan did not have a platform, if there was no release valve. This is a man who could have gone nuts. And that's what trauma really is. Trauma is when you have an experience, you don't really know how to process the experience. There is no one out there to help you process the experience in a healthy way. So it kind of gets stuck here like a lump. And you can't breathe well. And that's how you will function for the rest of your life. You just breathe from this tiny little part of you. You can't do much because you run out of energy quickly. So whatever the experience is, if you have a support system, if you have a release valve of sorts, use it. The more intense the experience, the more isolated you may feel, especially, again, if you don't have a community. I remember that one of the people in the gathering, he had this dream, and it was really, really intense. He wakes up and he starts screaming, and his roommates go upstairs and say, "What's going on? Are you okay?" He says, yeah, I just had like a dream or something. So, what was the dream about? Oh, it wasn't really anything. Because that the language of dreams and the language of this particular path, playing with these ideas, they're private. You can't expose other people to this stuff because they won't really understand. And it kind of just contaminates the environment, especially your interior. And so he wakes up in the morning, and the first thing he does is he calls Hussein, and then he calls me, and then he calls the other Hussein. And then that night all of us gather and we sit. And I think Hussein had a private conversation with him for about half hour. Then we had food, and then he just opened Hafiz and read some poetry and gave commentary, and that was it. And he survived. There was a guy who worked at Hussein's shop for a few weeks. His name was Ishaq. he had an experience that he wasn't ready for. And he didn't have the language for it. I didn't have the support system. And he literally went nuts. You know. And a lot of people afterwards, his family, his friends, kind of went to support him, and he was okay after a while. You know, if you read Rashad's book, what was his, The Invisible Way, he speaks about a woman in the book whose name is Noor, I think, where Hamid tells him that he should not be around this woman too much. She had an experience for which she didn't have the proper capacity. It overwhelmed her, broke certain parts of her that needed to be intact, and so she was only there so that Hamid could take care of her. You know. The truth is, Cassie, at the end of the day, none of us know what we are ready for, what we can carry. Some things can actually break us. You know. There may be help out there, there may not be. I mean, in many ways, we're very lucky because our experiences, for the most part, are mediocre. They're not as intense, you know. The nice thing about Hussein, let me go back to that for a moment, is that he was very grounded. He didn't care for experiences. You know, I remember I had bought this, you know, the statue in the living room, Mary holding Jesus. I may have told you the story, I don't know, but, you know, we go down to the garage to play table tennis, and I say, Hussein, did you see what I bought? He says, what is it? That. What does it do? It's a statue. Oh, well, why did you buy it? Well, it's beautiful, look at it. How much did it cost? Well, it was, you know, $800. I got it for $350. So, what does it do? It doesn't do anything, man. It just sits there. It's beautiful. It's a piece of art. He looks at me and says, don't waste your money. You know, he wasn't like one of those, you know, Eckhart Tolle, Moji, Poji. He says, oh, it's beautiful. Every night sit there and close your eyes and, you know, envision Jesus Christ and Mary and, you know, none of that ridiculous stuff. This was a man who knew the complexities of life, the naivete that lives inside the 25-year-old, you know, that soon he's going to be 35. You know, it's kind of like that song, when I was 7 years old, my mom told me, you know, you better marry, otherwise you'll be lonely, you know. And you need people like that. You know, you need people who ground you. You know, they're important for your life. So, you know, you need someone to say, whatever the experience may be, regardless of how intense, it's a passing thing. Experiences appeal to your emotions. The emotions become chaotic. The intellect jumps in to help, but the intellect kind of gets confused and adds more to the intensity of emotions. Now you have the confusion of the intellect and the chaos of the emotions. You need to go somewhere. You know, it's like a big ship that you have an anchor on. You realize that, you know, the waves are far too strong, and you drop the anchor and it sits at the bottom of the ocean or the sea, and the ship moves around a little bit, but it's not going to go, you know, too far from the center, and you need that. I don't think any of us in this room have that kind of a problem, for a couple of reasons. First, everyone in this room writes well. You have a journal. Everyone in this room does. and you write in your journal. That is a release valve that you should use. You know, if writing doesn't come, well, call a friend. You know, you've been in this room with, I mean, all of us have been in this room with one another for a few months. You know, pick up the phone and call Jackie. Nothing wrong with that. You know, I mean, it may be that she doesn't talk very much, but what you need to understand is I don't know her intentions, but she comes every Thursday. There is something about her that is interested in what God knows, but she's interested. That should be a sufficient language for us, that just in case you call Allison, she's not there, you call Ginning, she's not there, you call Jackie. You need a release valve. All of us do. We had across the car wash from us lived this really, really nice man. His name was Gene. He was a mason. He had a wife, and because she had smoked all of her life, you know, she was walking with a machine. And he would always come to the car wash very, very angry, saying that I was planning to buy an RV so we could travel the US together, but my wife, you know, she can't breathe, she can't walk, she can't do anything. So, you know, I'm housebound. He went for a simple surgery. They told him it's going to take no more than 15 minutes. So he comes home and he comes to realize that he can't urinate. He can't use the bathroom. And it was a Friday. And this is Roseville, 1985. Like Kaiser just shuts down on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, you know. And so this man could not use the restroom Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When they rushed him to the hospital on Monday, and they had to put a needle inside him to open, you know, a pipe. For the first 15 minutes, the only thing that came out was blood. Then came the urine. And I think experiences are very much like that. They need to be released in some shape or form. It's important. You know. You know, I don't think people go homeless just overnight. I really think like they try and they try and they try. They try to find someone to talk to. You know, and there comes a point where something about them just breaks. You know, and then the loneliness comes about. And then the lack of trust comes about. And then the anger comes about. And then after a while, you know, whatever good there was inside you that was able to allow you to be civilized and sane, it kind of goes away. You know, sometimes when you have emotions that are intense, they also make you feel very sure of yourself despite the chaos. And what you want to do is you want to just walk away from everything. In some ways, you're very lucky that whether through evolution or biology, you have this fear, you know, I can't just leave my wife or my husband or my kid. I can't just quit my job, you know. and you kind of throw your temper tantrum for 10-15 minutes or maybe a couple of days, and then you go back to being a camel with a good amount of lion inside you. But I can't stress this too much. Friendship is so important. It is such a wealth. It really, 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 really is. You guys really need to appreciate each other, in ways that you're not currently, but you should really, really appreciate each other. That all of you came to a point where you went to school and did humanities. All of you came to a point where you find yourself in the classroom. You're writing, you're giving lectures, you read books, you think about this stuff. That's, a great community. You should really talk to each other on a daily basis. We're just wondering how you are. That's what we used to do. And I know your guys' life is far too busy for that. Maybe once a day is too much. Maybe once a year would be good. But really, do it as often as you possibly can. Don't ramble on about ridiculous things. But, you don't need to be on the phone more than like 3-4 hours. A few minutes, how you doing? I was just checking up on you. It's something that Hussein was so good at. He would just drive to the car wash, and he lived in Bradshaw, in Sacramento, that big long street. And he would just show up to the car wash. I just came by to see how you are. Oh, I'm doing okay. And then he would sit long enough, he would go to Dairy Queen and buy a full meal way back then, like for $3.65, and then he would go home and have some tea and dinner, and his wife would come. But, he was very generous in that way. And you guys should, be like that towards one another.
Can I ask you?
No. I'm just kidding. Of course, Cassie.
I just remember that, you said that, that's another poverty in our culture, that friendships are really difficult. And even if, we all have this in common, that I don't know if it's hard to find the time, or we're all exhausted, and even if we talk some, it's maybe not enough. And so I guess, how do you push through whatever that is that
you can't, despite what I'm saying, that you should call each other and be friends. Okay. It's really it's almost impossible, It's possible, but not very much. There are cultural issues. There's also biological issues. The biological issue is this. When you're young, you're just very free-spirited. You don't have responsibilities. When you're young, you are rich in being able to waste the time. When you get older, you're rich enough to waste money. In youth, you waste the time. And one of the nice things about wasting time with people on a regular basis is that the time that you waste or you spend on them, physically, emotionally, you become attached to them, especially if the both of you have some chemistry, You create history with one another. And without the history, there is no connection. You have to create history. It's not enough for you to just go out with Gening, like once every 2 months, have dinner, and then when your husband asks, so where were you? I was with my friend Gening. No, remove the friend. You were just with Gening. You know, because for friendship to be cooked, and it's like it's a dish, you know, it needs to be seasoned. And the only way this friendship can be seasoned is by spending time, you know. And then you need to, you know, I had a lot of friends before meeting Hussein, okay? When I met Hussein, my friendship ended, and I didn't have any problems with that, okay? Because once those friendship ended, I began to have two friends with whom I could speak the same language, you know. The thing with you guys is that if you were to spend a good amount of time together, slowly you'll come to realize you're beginning to adopt the same language, speak the same language, okay? So when Gening sees you, or Jackie sees you, or Stacy sees you, without asking you, without you saying anything to them, they'll just tell you, Cassie, something is going on with you. What is it? There is this intimacy that creates intuition that you have about one another, you know? So if you don't spend time or waste time, you can't create stories. Without stories, there is no history. And without history, there is no culture. There is no ritual. There are no narratives that bind all of you together. You know, I mean, that's one of the problems with nomads. Whether you're a physical nomad or an emotional nomad, it's like a man or a woman who can only stay in a relationship for no more than 6 months or a year. You know, just as you're about to create the right stories that create togetherness or intimacy, because you don't know what that means, you kind of just cut off the ties and you walk away. Okay. So, you know, if you guys can't spend time physically, you really just need to just text. You don't even have to be on FaceTime. You don't have to be on the phone, you know, hearing each other's voices. Just text, you know. And texting these days is easy. You have all these like pictures, you know.